Welcome to the inaugural video of Blurred Pixels. What we're going to do is we're going to actually start working on, well, it's branding. I mean, we need to build a brand, right? And we need to start prepping things to have a brand image on them. And so several years ago, I created a logo that Blurred Pixels is just a few squares, and I just created a logo that just had a few squares on it, had this kind of cyan glow around it, and I probably used it many different times over the course of the years. So this logo essentially was designed for, I don't know, I just felt like I should brand something. So Blurred Pixels, squares, okay, great. So what I did is I just created 3 squares and gave them a glow, and that was it. Just something pretty simple. And so it's been there since my original demo reel from college back in 2006. Now I'm old. So what I want to do is I kind of want to revitalize this logo for 2018. Well, now 2019. So the idea is to have this logo kind of move in a little bit, where it just kind of the logo, main logo part kind of moves toward you. It comes in from out of focus on the camera, and then there's going to be some like haze and mist and maybe a little bit of lens flares that are generated from that. And then in addition to that, since this is kind of like a blue, green, almost kind of like, I think I might even shift it a little bit toward teal on the logo. But the idea is I want some contrasting items to happen there. That I can use as an option. So, for example, I was thinking like sparks, like there's a fire nearby and you kind of get those little embers that kind of float off in there. And so this is really kind of just a demonstration, really to start with showing off the compositing systems in DaVinci Resolve, which is based on Digital Fusion. So we're going to go and essentially build this as a comp in Digital Fusion. So let's get started. Okay, so here's the logo in front of us. This is just wallpaper. It's a 2560 by 1440, something like that. I think it was built for a 27-inch iMac. And so what I did is I created that, or imported it into Photoshop, shrunk it down to 1920 by 1080, so we can have an HD version of it. And then, so I have this here, and let's take a look and examine it a little bit here. We're going to zoom in a little bit. So what you'll notice if I navigate around here, we had a little bit of a lens flare here. And this was all done in Photoshop. We have a little lens element here, some more lens elements here, a lens element, a couple of them here. We have these glows. And then if I zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see, and this may not show up very well on the actual YouTube because of compression, but there is a little bit of a smoke. I think I took some smoke stills, smoke on black, and just kind of comped them in there. What we're going to do to get this going is we're going to go ahead and we're not going to spend any time really in Photoshop. So what I did is I broke up these squares into 3 separate pieces. Because when I, like an idiot, when I built this, I flattened it and didn't save the original image. Thinking that, I'll just rebuild it later on. It's not that hard. And it isn't, because it's 3 squares. But what I did is I basically used the selection marquee tool, created 3 squares. These 2 are the exact same size. And I just filled them with black paint and put them on their own layers. So you can see it here that I have 1, I have 2, and I have 3. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and I exported these as PNGs to keep the transparency. So we'll go ahead and close Photoshop. We don't need that anymore. And we're going to open up the tool that we're going to use to get through this whole project, which is DaVinci Resolve. So I'm going to open up an untitled project in DaVinci Resolve. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead and move Resolve up to this window here. Okay, so DaVinci Resolve is many different applications. DaVinci Resolve actually started out officially as a color grading tool, and it was expensive. It was a very high-end color grading tool. And so if you go into the color grading system, there's a whole bunch of really nice color grading tools, which you can't see because my camera's in the way here. But let me just push it over here. And you see a whole bunch of really nice color grading tools for getting good power windows and stuff like that. And we'll get into color grading with DaVinci Resolve as well. But if you look down here at the bottom of DaVinci Resolve, there's actually several different modules. So there's the first one is import media. Then there's an edit timeline. So this is relatively new for Resolve. It actually, I think it came out in Resolve 12. Yeah, I think it's 12.5. But basically, they added a nonlinear editor in there. And it's when it first came out, it was okay. I still spent a lot of time in Premiere and Final Cut. Actually, the original Final Cut Studio, not Final Cut Pro X. I spent a lot of time in there, but I was kind of always keeping my eye on DaVinci Resolve as an editor. Mainly because Blackmagic kind of changed what they were doing with it. In order to sell hardware, they made the software free. So Blackmagic started selling cameras, and they made the hardware to run those cameras, or they made the software to run those cameras free. So DaVinci Resolve is a free application. And if you buy a higher end camera that is for more professional work, from like, versus like the Pocket or something like that, you get actually DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is a $300 application. And it gets to do a few extended things like noise reduction and multiple GPU acceleration. So that's definitely worth it if you're going to be doing professional applications. So they went from being a $250,000 machine and software company, and you have to have a grading suite and everything like that, to everybody and their mom can download the software for free. And this is a high-end professional piece of kit. This isn't just somebody playing at being professional. So the editor on here is something that they just kind of rolled into it. They also bought a company called Digital Fusion. And Digital Fusion is a compositing tool, a node-based compositing tool. So it's right up there with Shake, which is end-of-lifed by Apple, and Nuke, which is the kind of the current creme de la creme of film compositing. Shake and After Effects are two big ones, but they work very differently. For me, I'm a big fan of nodal-based compositing. It kind of looks like a big spaghetti mess, which you'll see as we get started. But for how my brain works, it makes a whole lot of sense. After Effects is very much layers like Photoshop. I was always told that I would love After Effects because I love Photoshop. But that's actually not the case. I really don't like After Effects terribly much. But I can still work in it. But I just don't typically use it. And so then we already looked at the color grading tools. And then we have Fairlight, which is audio mixing. So this is professional level audio mixing. They have a bunch of plugins and high-end mixing consoles and everything like that. It's actually designed to work with Fairlight mixing consoles. So it's actually pretty cool, and I haven't had a chance to delve in it very much. I'm an audio guy, but not much of a finishing, mastering audio guy for film production. So we'll probably be delving deep into it later on in this project. I'll probably have to mix everything down in here. So, and then we just have a final delivery mode, which you can export H.264 videos for YouTube. You can export ProRes masters. You can also export DCI packages for cinema. So it's really cool. It's a professional tool, and takes advantage of all the hardware that you have on your computer. So it's a very professional tool, and really, it's a really good tool that is free. And so that's kind of the point of this project. There's a lot of things that we're going to be using that aren't so free, like Maya. If we start using 3D Maya, or 3D in Maya, you guys aren't going to be able to necessarily go out and buy Maya. They do have like a subscription plan. If you are going to college, you can get like a 3-year demo as far as the education plan. But eventually, you got to pay for Maya. So we're trying to stick with things that are free. I would I would use other applications, but then that just makes this all conceptual and people can't mess with it on their own. So DaVinci for this project is going to be probably we're going to use to edit. I've just kind of decided that everything's now integrated into DaVinci. We're going to use it to edit. We're going to use it to composite, and we're going to use it to color grade, mix down audio, and we're going to deliver and export it out for this project. So, so we're going to kind of get exposed to that today. We're going to do not necessarily editing, but we are going to do some of the compositing stuff in Fusion, and obviously some delivering. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So let me get rid of my mug here. That's not my mug, that's my screen. Let me put me back down here. Okay, so going into Digital Fusion, actually we're going to go into editor real quick. We're going to start working with our footage. So this way this works is kind of like order of operations. You got to import your media, you got to edit, put your edit together, do all your compositing, do your final color grading, audio, and export out. So it's kind of an order of operations. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to import some footage, and I'm going to go into my RAID array. And while we're talking, RAID array. So I have, I could have just clicked into this and went over here, although I hit Command I, which is just a shortcut for import. It probably works for every video editor under the sun these days. So I'm just so used to hitting it. So I'm going to Command I, or I can just go into here, but I have a RAID. It's a G RAID. It is 2 spinning hard drives operating 2 terabytes in a RAID 0 array. So it's 4 terabytes total. It's not terribly fast, but it's fast enough for HD footage, which is what I'm doing. So I have many things on this drive, feature film and stuff like that. So I've actually used this drive for production as well, and I use it fairly often. So RAIDs are really good. If you don't have a RAID array, and a good fast SSD would be great. But if you're going to deal with 1080p footage, and this is not, when you think about footage, if you're relatively new to this type of things, footage is huge. Footage is huge. I mean, it's definitely a lot smaller these days because we have good intermediate codecs, but raw footage coming off a camera is huge. So to give you an example, I have a Blackmagic Pocket camera, and that shoots 1080p raw, and it actually is compressed raw. It's 2-to-1 compression. I can fit 7 minutes on a 32 gigabyte card. 7 minutes. That's a lot of space for 7 minutes of footage. And so when I switch it down to something like ProRes 422 or something like that, then that 7 minutes actually becomes a lot longer. Now I could get 30 or 2 hours, depending on which version of ProRes that I use. So we're going to be, when you start working with big files like raw files, and in our case, if we're doing animation, we're going to be working with EXRs and good still images that are not compressed at all. We're talking, you're going to need fast storage. And so even this RAID might not be enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to do with the best we can. I do have a SSD on the laptop here, and I also have an external SSD that I can shift some stuff over if we need to. But for today, this 1080p, we're not working with still images. Well, we are working with still images, but we're not working with still animated images. So we can actually get by with this. But you will see the system start to choke down when we start working in the 3D environment. So anyway, just a brief moment on file types. So let's go ahead and import footage. And I am going to, I've done this a couple times, so just be aware. I've actually done this a couple times. Just prepping for this is, I haven't spent a whole lot of time in Fusion, so I'm just going to rebuild everything from scratch. So there's a few things I need. I need the middle square, the upper left square, and the bottom right square. So that's going to come down into my clip pool. And you can't see them here, but they are those squares. You can't see them because they're transparent. And then I have 2 pieces of footage from a collection of effects DVDs. I think it's Video Copilot. I'll have to look and see who's the creator of it, but I think it's Video Copilot. It's like an action effects ones. Specifically, it's got a whole bunch of gunfire, squibs, and stuff like that. But in this case, I'm using these smoke items. Now, the one I bought was 720p, so it was back a long time ago. And when 720p was just going to be good enough for me, they now have a 4K one, which I would recommend just to future-proof yourself. But because we're dealing with smoke, smoke is actually very, I mean, it doesn't have sharp edges. So it's very easy that you can scale it up and nobody will notice. So we're going to go ahead and use these just to add some movement to our scene in addition to our logo. And so what I'm going to do is there is one of these that is longer than the other. Let's see, 2502, 1816. Okay, so we're going to go 1816. This is the length of the footage. We're going to go no bigger than the smallest footage that we have. So, all right, so we're going to go into edit here. And so it's 18 seconds, 16 frames. So I'm going to create a new composition. So we are going to go to, this is why I did it a couple times, because I hadn't done this in a while. So got to make sure your media pool is open. I had my effects library open, which is why I was confused. Media pool. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new fusion composition, and we are going to change the time to be 18. That's 185. That's weird. 18 and 16 frames. And we're going to do 24 frames a second. Here's my fusion comp. We're going to bring that down in the timeline here. And let me just play it back. Okay, so 1816. Okay, so there's my fusion composition. I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm going to go into fusion. And so the next module. And so this is fusion. So let me give you kind of a bird's eye view of what fusion is laid out here. So we have an A screen and a B screen. So A monitor, B monitor. We have an inspector, which gives us control of all of our tools. And then we have a toolbar here to add some commonly used compositing tools, as well as this is the node area. And this is where the spaghetti takes place, as I mentioned. We have a few other things that we can bring up. We can bring up the media pool if we want, effects library, clips, nodes. We can hide the node graph if we want to. I don't really want to. We have splines if we want to control animation curves, keyframes, information. We have metadata if there's metadata on the clips, and we can hide our inspector. And then, yeah, we can make our node graph a little bit bigger if we want to with this button. So, okay. So first things first, how do we navigate around in our graph here? So if I hit the middle mouse button, I'm moving around my node, which is going to be very important. If I hit the command key and I scroll up and down, I'm also able to move around in my node tree. So this is going to be very pivotal for as we're doing this, because we absolutely going to need to move around the nodes. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get our footage imported in here. So I can either go to my media pool and start dragging stuff in, or I can create add tool and go into in-out media ins. I'm just going to go ahead and just start dragging stuff in, because it basically is what it's going to do is essentially give me a media in node when I do that. So there's my middle, upper left, puffy smoke number 1, puffy smoke number 2. Okay, so this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit, let me close my media pool here, and I'm going to go to this node right here, this media in 1, or media in 1, and I'm going to press the 1 key. And so this will load this media clip, and you can see it right here by this indicator, into video 1. And I can also hit 2, which would load it into video 2. And you can see both of these are lit. And then I can also switch off and do video 2 on that one and video 2 on that one. So, or I could do video 1. So it gives me the ability to kind of A/B some things. And so in this case, if I go to clip 1, I see this is bottom right. So I'm going to rename this, which rename is F2. Unfortunately, this shows up on my other screen. So we're going to call this bottom right. And we're going to F2 this, and we're going to call this one middle. And this one is top left. Okay, so that is the 3 pieces of my logo. And then we have media in 1. So this is smoke. And this is the one part, just so you know, if you're familiar with DaVinci Resolve uses your graphics processor quite a bit. And Fusion is the one part of Resolve where it doesn't terribly use it much. So this is not playing back very much in real time. I don't feel like it. It could very well be, but I don't get the sense that it is. It just feels like it's running a little slow. Fusion is, since it's a compositor, it's not using the graphics engine. It's actually designed to use RAM and kind of RAM cache everything. So Fusion will get slow. Fusion will be the slowest part of this application. But you notice here as I kind of scrub, you notice these lines kind of fill up with green. This means they've rendered the cache or to the RAM cache. So if I play back in here, they'll go full speed. And actually it looks like, because it rendered the cache and it didn't change, we are running full speed here. But as we start to add things to this, don't expect full speed. And that's just the nature of compositing. So what's the difference between these two smokes? They both go the whole time. This is my, yeah, so we'll just call this, doesn't really matter. I guess we'll call it smoke 1 and smoke 2. It helps if I hit the rename on that, smoke 2. And again, I'm hitting F2 just to get the names. And then so that's my media out. We'll leave that called media out. We need one other thing. There's one other problem with this. If I load up these logos, you'll see there is something needed for each one of these here. So I've lost my RAM preview. Interesting. There we go. That's weird. Okay, so you notice that there's this checkerboard pattern, and that means is because I imported them as PNGs. These images are, you know, you see the black block, and then you see nothing. These are the alpha maps for it. So that way they could be 3 individual pieces, but the logo, if you recall, wasn't 3 individual it's 3 individual pieces, but the background there obviously wasn't checkerboarded. So what we need to do is we need to add a background to it. So we're going to go ahead and add something, add a tool, and we're going to create a generator, and we're going to create a background. And we are going to do a black background. Actually, I'm not going to do completely black. I'm going to do it slightly lighter than black. I'm not going to have any color with it though. So like a very, 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 very dark gray. It's so dark that it might get compressed out. Okay, so now that we have all of our footage, we have it imported in, and we have it all on our media nodes. What we're going to do is we're going to create underlays. Now, underlays is a way of organizing the spaghetti that is going to be this composition. So let me go back real quick here to our comp in DaVinci. And so we have all the items related to the logo here. We have the smoke, and we have the media out. There will be a couple other sections that will be lens flares, and a couple sections that will be the 3D particle system that we're going to build. So what we're trying to do is essentially keep this organized. And this is the one downside about nodal-based compositing, is we can have a node here that's and I'm just being weird here. So we'll have all this spaghetti back and forth. These nodes could be connected over here. This node could be connected to that node, and it could be 1,000 miles away from this node, and we could have a big old spaghetti graph that kind of looks like that. We don't want to do that. We want to keep everything organized. Now, compositions can get this big to the point where you can't see everything, and that's normal. So that's why you want to use underlays. So real quick, I'm going to build an underlay. Let me put all my stuff back together. The first thing you can do to build an underlay is you can hit Shift and Space, and it'll create a selection tool. So what this is this is all the tools that are in DaVinci Resolve, or well, in the Fusion module of DaVinci Resolve, but all the tools that are related to Fusion, as well as like all the Resolve effects tools as well. So you can add a composite of these tools. And so like if we want to create a new in and out mode, we can add it in. We can do film grain. We can do color correction. We can do many different things in here. So you could right click and you create a tool. And so if you're not familiar with the tools in Fusion, what you'd want to do is go through this menu set. I kind of know the tools that I want to use right now, although sometimes I forget the names of them, like underlay. I keep thinking background, but if you know the name of the tool you're looking for, like color corrector or something like that, you can hit Shift Space, and it brings up this menu, and then you can type part of the word. So I typed in the word underlay, and there's my underlay. And so I'll hit F2, and this keeps popping up over here, but we're going to call this logo. And so what I'll do is I will create this underlay, and I can resize it. And we can give it a different color. So we'll do teal. So there's my logo. Now I haven't done any compositing yet. So all these nodes are just kind of sitting here doing nothing. But you know, they're going to be organized. And so the purpose of this underlay is, when I zoom out, I can see that this section is related to one part of the comp and this section is related to another part of the comp. That's what the underlays are for. But then also I can move that section of the comp around and kind of easily, quickly organize things. So let me build a couple more underlays. We'll move this over here. Shift Space again, underlay. This one's going to be related to the smoke, so I'm going to hit F2. And we're going to call this smoke. And we're going to give this a different color. Since we're talking about smoke, why don't we just give it a kind of a smoky color. You got to right click over the title to give it the color. So, wow, there really isn't a gray color. So we can, I'll just give it some sort of color. So set color, we'll go lime. All right, so there's my smoke. And so what I'll do is I'll take these smokes and put them in here and put them over there. And then the last thing I'll put out is my media out node. I will just have that floating out there. Usually it doesn't need anything. I'll just make sure it's always on the right. So the other thing is we're going to create some other underlays, and that'll help us kind of keep organized as we're going on. So space underlay, and usually the last one you have is kind of highlighted at the bottom, so we can just kind of quickly get to it. So we're going to call this particles. Okay. And we're going to give this a color of orange because that's what color my particles are going to be. We're just going to set this off to the side down here. And we'll resize it as we add nodes to it. And then we are going to do underlay. We're going to do one more underlay, and this is for my lens flares. So I'm going to set my color to bright blue, rename. We're going to call it flares. And so we're going to do stacking lens flares on this one. So I'm going to put this, stacking lens flares are going to be over top because the lens flare comes from the camera. So it's generally over top of everything. So I'll put that over there. And then particles is probably going to be fairly large. So I'm going to actually make it pretty big. And then what I'll do is I'm going to leave some space between these things. And so now you notice how big this area got while we're organizing it. I'm going to leave a little space between these so I can connect everything out to this media out node. And that way we can get our graphics out. So now it's time to kind of start putting everything together. So in our logo, we have our background, which is on screen 1. We have bottom right, middle, top left. And so the main way to get these all to come together is the easiest way is a merge node. So we're going to start with our bottom layer, and we are going to create a merge. So that's the quick menu item is right here. The other thing I could have done is hit shift space, do merge, or I could have right clicked and created a tool. So I've got a merge. And so by default, because I had this selected, my bottom layer in this merge tool is going to be this one. It's basically going to create that connection for me. If I don't have that connection created, I can automatically just drag it over to it. And what it is the first thing that it connects to is going to be the bottom layer. The next thing it's going to connect to is going to be the top layer. So I'm going to basically create background, top left, middle, bottom right. That's how I'm going to build this, just like the logo is there. So I'm going to create this merge, and then I've got top left. So we're going to plug this one into that merge, which is the absolute wrong one. So if I'm wrong here, I'll just click on that noodle and it'll go away. Okay, and so I'm going to check my work by loading this up in number 2. So can't really see anything yet. We'll get there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple more merge nodes. So I'm not going to select anything here, and I'll just create merge nodes, and they won't be connected to anything. So if you don't have anything selected when you connect them, they're just not connected. So I'm going to do this merge. So I want to take this merge, and I want to take its gray output and plug it into this merge. And we're going to do the middle into this one. And then we are going to take the gray output of that merge and do the bottom right gray output into that one. And so now I should have all of my nodes merged together to create that logo. Now you can't see anything because we're talking about blacks here, black on black, and it's just not, it's not going to work. So there is something I'm going to add to these. So I'm going to move these nodes over here. But in order to test this and make sure this is working, let me look at this last merge. I've put it on frame 2 here, and the background, I put that on frame 1. And so I'm going to take the background color and I'm going to shift that. And now that I've shifted that, you can see here's the background color is bright red. And then this background color here, notice I'm missing one. So my bottom right is not quite loaded. So let's see why that is. So merge out here and output from there. There it goes. So probably what I did is probably didn't connect the output of it. It probably connected the alpha map of it, which is usually the blue one. So now that I see this logo, I know I'm good. So I can go back to my background color and I can bring this back down to something that's a little bit more normal, a little bit more gray than the actual blocks itself. So this might not show up on YouTube because of compression, but that's fine. You'll see it shortly. And so now the smoke, we want to merge the smokes together. So the smokes, 2 problems that I have with the smoke is we are working on a 1080p canvas. So if I go into my settings for DaVinci Resolve, if I go into my project settings are 1920 by 1080. And so these particular pieces of item, smoke, are 720. So 720p, so they're not quite big enough. Also, I don't want the smoke coming from the bottom. I kind of want it coming from the top. So I want to flip these. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to resize them, and then I'm going to rotate them before I comp them over the logo. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So to flip these, we're going to do transforms. So I've got one transform here. And we are going to rotate. Let me look at this. Oh, first I got to plug it into. Oh, that is a 3D transform. It's the wrong transform. That only works in the 3D system. So transform XF. See, I got to do that. Okay, so now we can connect that in. Transform XF. Okay, so now angle. 180 degrees. So let's look at that. We've now rotated it, so now the smoke's coming from the ceiling. Cool. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. So rather than reinvent the wheel, let's just go ahead and make another transform. So I Control C, Control V, and we'll plug that in here. And this one will also be backwards or upside down. So now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and rescale these. So Shift, we're going to go to Scale. And we could go, actually, you know what? Let's not use Scale, because if you notice the scale, we can get size here, and that's great. But unfortunately, the size is like 1.0, so it's not really scaled the way I want it. So we need to go with something a little bit more specific. So I'm going to select my transform here, and I am going to go to my Insert a Tool. And so I've got something selected, so I'm going to go to Insert a Tool, and we are going to go into Transform, and we're going to go to Resize. And Resize now gives me a settings to resize to. So 1920 by 1080, it's automatically going to resize it based on the project size. Now I could go bigger, but it's going to resize it based on the project size. So now I'm 1920 by 1080 on the output. And so I'm going to take this resize, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and we're going to go here. And so now I have my two smokes. So I'm going to take my two smokes here, and real quick, I need to make the smoke part of it transparent. So in order to do that, I need to do another node. So Shift Space, I'm going to use what's called a Luma keyer. It's a luminance keyer, and if you're not familiar with what that does, it's kind of like a green screen, except instead of using a color like green screen or blue screen, it's going to use the brightness of your scene. In this case, it works fantastically well since this was all shot on black, and that black is absolute. So literally, if I go into the Luma keyer and I press number 2 here and load this up on this frame, you can see there's a little bit of wisp of smoke here, and that's it. And so when I comp it over this, you'll absolutely see it. So it's literally just taking the black out right away. I can adjust how well that's doing that by using these controls here. So you notice it's kind of getting a little grainier and everything like that. So I might adjust this a little bit. I might not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until we comp it to see. But I'm going to take another luminance keyer, and I'm going to do the same for this one. And so just checking that one, exact same. And then what I want to do is I want to merge these two together. So I'm going to do that. So I will create, and it really doesn't matter which one goes over which one, I don't think, merge. So we'll just do one over the other. And then now we see the smoke kind of combined here into two different streams of smoke. So that looks cool. You know, obviously we're not seeing a whole lot of detail here. So now we just need to get these logos to go over top of it. So let's do that. Let's create a merge outside. So Shift Space, we'll do a merge. And I'm going to take this merge, the bottom. I want my logo to be on the bottom, and I want my smoke to be on the top. And then we're going to view this. And so now you can see the smoke is over top the logo. The logo is obviously not standing out very well, but the smoke is over top of the logo. So that is going to be kind of the foundation of where we're going to get this going here. Okay, so we have our logo put together. We have the smoke effect put together. So now what we need to do is a few things. We need to create the glow around the logo, the little individual pieces. We got to create the motion for the logo. And then we've got to create the smoke effect. We got to make it a little bit more subtle because it's pretty noticeable. And we're going to try to create that simulated camera move as well. We're going to do that in 2D. We are going to be messing with 3D in this lesson, but we're later on when we get into the particle system, but we're not going to mess with 3D right now because we can kind of fake it, and it'd probably be a little cheaper on render time to try to fake it. So, I mean, we could have fully created these blocks in 3D, gave them the glow effect and moved them and shifted them around in 3D. But considering we're not moving it terribly much, there's not a whole lot of parallax that we're going to be seeing out of it. It's just going to create kind of this just forward momentum. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Okay, so where we left off, let's do first things first. Let's save our project. We're going to call this BP Logo 2019. Yep, saving's always important. Okay, so we have our logo, we have our smoke, and then we have room for later things. So let's go to our logo. Let's create this glow. So what I want to do, let's look at the, I'm going to look at the main output merge here of the logo. So no smoke. And I'm going to create a couple different things in between here. So I'm still going to output this merge, but I'm going to select the item that I want to create the items on top of. So what I'm first going to do is create a drop shadow. So shadow, drop shadow, add. Okay. So I'm creating a drop shadow, and it's weird because I'm not actually there. You could use a glow effect in here, but the glow effect doesn't quite work the way you would expect it on these particular objects. It's more like a lens glow. So if I was making the like the effect of like there's something smeared, Vaseline or something smeared on my lens, and kind of creating a glow effect from a camera, that's what those glows are for. So in order to make the glows around the logo, a la like the example we have here, we would have to do something else. So I found that drop shadows actually work really, really well. So if I take the drop shadow, instead of making it a shadow color, I make it a blue color and increase the softness, I can get my effect. But it's not quite the same effect as this. There's a very hot spot here, and then it kind of fades off. So I'm actually going to use two drop shadows. So I'm going to use one that's really bright, kind of almost on a white, and have its softness drawn back a little bit. And then I'm going to create another drop shadow. So it's just shadow. And I'm going to add, oh, and let me resize my, my underlay a little bit here so I can get a little bit more organized. I'm going to move these boys over here. So I'm going to take my other shadow, and that's where it's going to get the blue from. And actually, let me go to a blue teal color, and then I can increase my softness a little bit more on that. Maybe add a little bit more saturation and color. So let me zoom in here. By the way, I'm navigating through here the same way I would navigate through here with the middle mouse scrolls and the command key. So let me go back to the original shadow, maybe adjust its softness down. There we go. So it's like a harder edge. And this one, so we'll shrink that edge down. And so I think, yeah, that's very close to what we want. Maybe a shift toward blue. Okay, so I'm going to take these two nodes, and I'm going to copy them, and I'll paste them right there. And then if I take those two nodes that are selected, I shift select them, and then shift them into a noodle. I guess you can't do it with two nodes, but if you shift select your node, like a node. So, oh wow, I did something there. Let me undo that. So let me do this. Let me break these. If I shift select it into the chain, it connects over that, so that I can kind of add that effect. Let me add. All right. Disconnect that. Shift, and so it just auto connects it to the noodle. Okay, so then we're going to go fit. There we go. And there's my logo. So I can tweak these. Like I said, if I want to do a little bit wider of a glow, see that's, we'll just copy this value. Yeah, we'll do a little bit wider of a glow. Copy this value. And we'll paste it on all the other ones. All right, cool. So now, when I look at this, I will see all this kind of merged together. Now I'll see kind of the logo we were going for. Smoke's still pretty noticeable, a little too extreme. The other thing is I'm going to probably adjust these luma keyers a little bit here. So let me adjust this out so I can get, I want a little bit more of that smoke back, but I don't want the black. So, but I want a little bit more of the smoke effect. So I'm going to bring the tolerance of the high down a little bit. And let me actually figure out which one I'm doing that on. So I think this one is a more direct smoke. So I'm going to actually bring that tolerance down. I think this one is it fills more of the screen. So I'm going to bring that one up. Okay. So we've got those merged. Now we want to create the effect. And so again, we're going to make this longer here because we're going to add more stuff to our logos. We're going to do a scale. So add tool, and we are going to transform scale. Oh, didn't quite make it big enough. All right. So sometimes you got to mess with these underlays as you go. So I'm going to make this scale, and we can shrink this down. As a matter of fact, I kind of have some set values that I had for this. So I'm going to copy this one. I'm going to not paste it there. Okay, so you can go away. And you can go there. Shift that one in there. We're going to do, so that one's 0.8, so we're going to do slightly bigger there. And then put my scale down here so it's just easier to mess with, and we'll do slightly bigger than the other one. So they're also going to have essentially different scale speeds. So, and I want to say this one was a little bit smaller the last time I did this, like 0.75. This was 0.83. And this is 0.86. And so what I'm going to do is I'm at the beginning of my animation, right? So this is my red cursor. This is ins and outs. So I'm at the beginning of my animation. I'm going to go to the very beginning. I'm going to go to scale 1, and I'm going to adjust this one up. And from frame 1, I turn on a keyframe, and I'm going to go all the way to the last frame. And I'm going to make this 1.0. And it's going to go to regular size. And I'm going to go to the next one. And I'm going to go to the first frame again. I'm going to add a keyframe. And we're going to make this 1.0. Oh, no, we're not. That was 0.83. So we added a keyframe, 0.83. And then we're going to go to the end. And then we're going to make it 1.0. And then we're going to go to this one. Add a keyframe. We're going to and we're going to go to the first frame. We're going to add that keyframe there. Sorry. Go to the end frame, and we're going to do 1.0. And then we're going to watch this animation real quick here. And so this logo is going to move in slowly. And I don't know. This is where playing back doesn't come in real time because we're doing all this compositing, the luminance keys, and everything like that. So I want to just see this. I'll just step through this. We'll stop it, and we'll just step through. And so my logo is going to come in from far away and just kind of move in. But every piece of it has its own scale, so it's going to kind of give it that sense of 3D that isn't really there.